Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Royal Arch Degree from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey. Royal Arch Degree. If we accept the Masters, there is no other degree in Masonry that has been so extensively diffused or is as important in its historical and symbolical import as the Royal Arch, or as it has been called on account of its sublime significance, the Holy Royal Arch. Dermot calls it the root, heart and marrow of Masonry, and Oliver says that it is indescribably more august, sublime and important than any which precede it, and is in fact the summit and perfection of ancient Masonry. It is found in fact in every rite in some modified form, and sometimes under a different name, but always preserving those same symbolic relations to the lost word which constitute its essential character. Whoever carefully studies the Master's degree in its symbolic signification will be convinced that it is in a mutilated condition, that is, that it is imperfect and unfinished in its history, and that, terminating abruptly in its symbolism, it leaves the mind still waiting for something that is necessary to its completeness. This deficiency is supplied by the Royal Arch Degree. Hence, when the union took place in England in 1813 between the two rival Grand Lodges, while there was a strong and hereditary disposition on the part of the English Masons to preserve the simplicity of the old York Rite, by confining Freemasonry to the three symbolical degrees, it was found necessary to define ancient craft Masonry as consisting of 3 degrees, including the Holy Royal Arch. There was a time, undoubtedly, when the Royal Arch did not exist as an independent degree, but was a complementary part of the Master's degree to which it gave a necessary completion. Ramsay introduced it into the high degrees on the continent. Dermot fabricated it for the use of his Grand Lodge, and Dunkerley is said to have dissevered it from the 3rd degree in the legal Grand Lodge of England. The precise method and time of its disseverance from the 3rd establishment as an independent degree in England and America constitutes an important and interesting part of the history of Masonry. It is evident that the existence of the Royal Arch as an independent and distinct degree dates at a comparatively modern period. In none of the old manuscript records of Masonry is there the slightest allusion to it, and Anderson does not make any reference to it in his History of the Order. The true word, which constitutes the essential character of the Royal Arch Degree, was found by Dr. Oliver in an old Master Mason's tracing board of the date of about 1725. And hence he concludes that the word, at that time, had not been severed from the 3rd degree and transferred to another. In other words, that the Royal Arch Degree had not then been fabricated. The earliest mention of it in England that he could find was in the year 1740, just 2 years after the schism which separated the ancient from the modern Grand Lodge. I use the usually accepted titles without any reference to their propriety, and he attributes its fabrication to the former body. Stone, Letters on Masonry, page 50, with a very imperfect knowledge of Masonic history, attributes its origin to the primordial chapter of Arras. But that body was established by the young pretender in 1747, and Oliver, as is seen, recognized the existence of the degree in England 7 years before. The truth, however, is that Ramsay had long before incorporated a Royal Arch Degree under a different title in his high degrees. And there is no doubt that Dermot, who was really the inventor of the English system, was indebted to him for many of his ideas, as Dunkerley subsequently was when he composed the Royal Arch for the legal Grand Lodge. But the system of Ramsay was very different in its main details from that of either. Ramsay, about the time of Dermot's innovation, had visited England and attempted to introduce his high degrees, which were rejected by the legal Grand Lodge. And there is every reason to believe that he communicated to seceding Masons a portion of the inventions which he had engrafted upon the Masonry of the continent. Oliver says of the Royal Arch that was invented by the seceders that, although it contained elements of the greatest sublimity, it was imperfect in its construction and unsatisfactory in its result, which will tend to show from the crude and imperfect state in which it then appeared that the degree was in its infancy. The anachronisms with which it abounded and the loose manner in which its parts were fitted into each other betrayed its recent origin. In fact, it was evidently an attempt to combine several of the continental degrees of sublime masonry into one, without regard to the order of time, propriety of arrangement, or any other consistent principle. And therefore we find in the degree, as it was originally constructed, jumbled together in a state of inextricable confusion, the events commemorated in Ramsay's Royal Arch, the Knights of the Ninth Arch, of the Burning Bush, of the East or Sword, of the Red Cross, the Scotch Fellow Craft, the Select Master, the Red Cross Sword of Babylon, the Rose Croix, etc. As late as the year 1758, the Constitutional Grand Lodge had no Royal Arch degree, for in that year the Grand Secretary declared that our society is neither arch, Royal Arch, nor ancient. And in the lecture of the third degree prepared by Anderson and Desaguliers, it is said that which was lost is now found, meaning, says Oliver, that the Master Mason's word was delivered to the newly raised Master in the latter ceremonies of the third degree, which would preclude the necessity for a Royal Arch degree. But about the year 1770, Thomas Dunkerley, who had been authorized by the Constitutional Grand Lodge, or the Moderns, to inaugurate a new system of lectures, commenced his modifications of the old system, which had been hitherto practiced by dissevering the Master's word from the third degree. This involved the necessity of a new degree, and Dunkerley, borrowing from Ramsay, from Dermot, and from his own invention, fabricated the degree of Royal Arch for the modern Masons, a violent innovation for the success of which he was indebted only to his own great popularity among the craft and the influence of the Grand Master. Oliver thinks, for good reasons, that the introduction of the Royal Arch degree into the modern system could not have been earlier than the dedication of Freemasons' Hall in 1776, 10 years after the regulations of the degree were first established, and at the union of the two Grand Lodges in 1813, the Holy Royal Arch was formally and officially recognized as a part of ancient craft masonry, and so it has ever since remained. The result of our investigations, in which we have mainly relied on the authority of the learned Oliver, is that until the year 1740, the essential element of the Royal Arch constituted a component part of the Master's degree, and was of course its concluding portion. That as a degree it was not at all recognized, being but the complement of one. That about that time it was dissevered from its original connection and elevated to the position and invested with the form of a distinct degree by the body which called itself the Grand Lodge of England according to the old constitutions, but which is more familiarly known as the Dermot or the Athol Grand Lodge, and frequently as the Ancients. That in 1776 a similar degree, fabricated by Dunkerley, was adopted by the Constitutional Grand Lodge or the Moderns, and that in 1813 it was formally recognized as a part of the York Rite by the United Grand Lodge of England. In America, the history of the degree followed that of the English system, as most of the American lodges derived their warrants from the Athol Grand Lodge. The Royal Arch must have been introduced at the time of their constitution. The government of the degree was for a long time under the Masters' Lodges, and many years elapsed before it was taken thence and placed under the control of distinct bodies called Grand Chapters. In America, it was not until 1798 that a Grand Chapter was formed, and many lodges persisted for some years after in conferring the Royal Arch degree under the authority of their warrants from Grand Lodges. Maintaining everywhere an identity in its symbolic signification, the Royal Arch varies in different countries in its historical details. Ramsay's degree, from which all the continental systems originated, is entirely different from that practiced in Great Britain, in Ireland, and in the United States. Its type may be found in the 13th degree, or Knight of the Ninth Arch of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. In England, Scotland, and the United States, the circumstance on which the degree is founded, or in technical language, the legend, is the same, but the preliminary organization is different in each country. In England, in 1834, considerable changes were made in the ceremonies of exaltation, but the general outline of the system was preserved. The degree is the fourth in the Masonic series, and a Master Mason who has been so for 12 months is eligible for exaltation. The principal officers of an English chapter are 3 principals, Zerubbabel, Haggai, and Joshua, 3 sojourners and 2 scribes, Ezra and Nehemiah, a treasurer and a janitor. In Scotland, the preliminary degrees are Mark, Past, Excellent, and Super Excellent Master, and the principal officers are the same as in England. In Ireland, the legend was formally different from that of England and founded on events recorded in the second book of Chronicles, 34:14, where Hilkiah is said to have found a book of the law of the Lord given by Moses. The date of this degree was therefore 624 BC, or 90 years after ours. The preliminary or qualifying degrees were Past, Excellent, and Super Excellent. But the Irish system was changed some years ago, and a new ritual, somewhat resembling the American, was adopted. The officers do not materially differ from those of English and Scottish chapters. In America, the legend is the same as the English, but varying in some of its details. The preliminary degrees are Mark, Past, and Most Excellent Master. And the principal officers are High Priest, King, Scribe, Captain of the Host, Principal Sojourner, Royal Arch-Captain, and 3 Grand Masters of the Veils. I have said that however the legend or historical basis might vary in the different rites, in all of them the symbolical signification of the Royal Arch was identical. Hence, the building of a second temple, so prominent a symbol in the English and American systems and so entirely unknown in the continental, cannot be considered as an essential point in the symbolism of the degree. It is important in the systems in which it occurs, but it is not essential. The true symbolism of the Royal Arch system is founded on the discovery of the lost word. It can never be too often repeated that the word is, in Masonry, the symbol of truth. This truth is the great object of pursuit in Masonry, the scope and tendency of all its investigations, the promised reward of all Masonic labor. Sought for diligently in every degree and constantly approached but never thoroughly and intimately embraced at length in the Royal Arch, the veils which concealed the object of search from our view are withdrawn and the inestimable prize is revealed. This truth, which Masonry makes the great object of its investigations, is not the mere truth of science or the truth of history, but is the more important truth, which is synonymous with the knowledge of the nature of God. That truth which is embraced in the sacred tetragrammaton, or omnific name, including in its signification his eternal, present, past, and future existence, and to which he himself alluded when he declared to Moses, "I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, but by my name Jehovah was I not known unto them." The discovery of this truth is then the essential symbolism of the Royal Arch degree. Wherever it is practiced, and under some peculiar name, the degree is found in every rite of Masonry. This symbolism is preserved. However the legend may vary, however the ceremonies of reception and the preliminary steps of initiation may differ, the consummation is always the same, the great discovery which represents the attainment of truth. The early history of this degree is involved in obscurity, but in the opinion of the late brother W.J. Hughan, its origin may be ascribed to the 4th decade of the 18th century. The earliest known mention of it occurs in a contemporary account of the meeting of a lodge, number 21, at Youghal in Ireland in 1743, when the members walked in procession and the master was preceded by the Royal Arch carried by 2 excellent masons. See Excellent Master. Brother W.J. Chet Woder Crawley published in his Commentaria Hybemica, Fasciculus 1, 1895, the following reference. The earliest known occurrence of the words Royal Arch is met with in the report of the procession of the Youghal Lodge on St. John's Day, December 27, 1743. The next mention of it is in Dr. Dassigny's A Serious and Impartial Inquiry into the Cause of the Present Decay of Freemasonry in the Kingdom of Ireland, published in 1744, in which the writer says that he is informed that in York is held an assembly of Master Masons under the title of Royal Arch Masons who, as their qualifications and excellencies are superior to others, receive a larger pay than working Masons. He also speaks of a certain propagator of a false system some few years ago in this city, Dublin, who imposed upon several very worthy men under a pretense of being master of the Royal Arch, which he asserted he had brought with him from the city of York, and that the beauties of the craft did principally consist in the knowledge of this valuable piece of masonry. However, he carried on his scheme for several months, and many of the learned and wise were his followers, till at length his fallacious art was discovered by a brother of probity and wisdom, who had some small space before attained that excellent part of Masonry in London, and plainly proved that his doctrine was false. Whereupon the brethren justly despised him, and ordered him to be excluded from all benefits of the craft. And although some of the fraternity have expressed an uneasiness at this matter being kept a secret from them, since they had already passed through the usual degrees of probation, I cannot help being of opinion that they have no right to any such benefit until they make a proper application and are received with due formality, and as it is an organized body of men who have passed the chair and given undeniable proofs of their skill in architecture, it cannot be treated with too much reverence. And more especially since the character of the present members of that particular lodge are untainted, and their behavior judicious and unexceptionable, so that there cannot be the least hinge to hang a doubt on but that they are most excellent Masons. This passage makes it plain that the Royal Arch degree was conferred in London before 1744, say about 1740, and would suggest that York was considered to be its place of origin. Also, as Lawrence Dermot became a Royal Arch Mason in 1746, it is clear that he could not have been, as is sometimes asserted, the inventor of the rite. Our old friend, Brother William Tate of Belfast, Ireland, promptly advised us when he made the happy discovery of what to this time is the earliest reference to the Royal Arch in a lodge minute book. But the earliest minute book of the degree actually being conferred is that of the Fredericksburg Lodge in Virginia. On December 22nd, 1753, Vernon Lodge number 123, Coleraine, County Derry, was warranted by the Grand Lodge of Ireland May 8th, 1741. Two of the old minute books of this lodge, running from 1749 to 1783, have been preserved. In the first of these, under date of April 16th, 1752, we find, "At this lodge Blair proposed Samson Moore, a master and Royal Arch Mason, to be admitted a member of our lodge." Hitherto, the earliest reference to the degree in a minute book was the Grand Committee of the Antiochs, September 2nd, 1752. While the earliest minute of the degree actually being conferred is still that of the Fredericksburg Lodge, December 22nd, 1753. The second book of Vernon Lodge contains a record dating the degree to an even earlier period than 1752. This occurs in a list of the members of a lodge drawn up in 1767, where after each name is put the date at which he was made Royal Arch. The earliest date given of a Royal Arch reception is March 11th, 1745, and the latest June 25th, 1765. Brother John Heron Lepper, contributing this information to Miscellanea Latimorum, 1925, Volume 9, pages 138 and 139, says, "A glance at the map will show how far Coleraine lies from Dublin, and to find the Royal Arch degree known in the former place within a year of Dassigny's famous reference in 1744 makes one wonder whether it could have been such a recent introduction into Ireland as his text claims." See also pages 99 and 100, Volume 1, History, Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Ireland by Brothers J.H. Lepper and Philip Crossall, and Transactions Quatuor Coronati Lodge, 1923, Volume 36, pages 193 and 194, where Brother Tate, among other items of interest relating to these records, points out with good reason that even at this early date the Royal Arch must have been widely spread, when we find it practiced in places so far apart as York and Virginia, London and Stirling, Youghal in the south, and Coleraine in the north of Ireland. A mention of the degree occurs in the minutes of the Antiochs Grand Lodge for March 4th, 1752, when a formal complaint was made by several brethren against those. Phelon and John Mackey, better known as Leg of Mutton Masons, for clandestinely making masons for the mean consideration of a leg of mutton for dinner or supper. Upon examining some brothers whom they pretended to have made Royal Arch men, the parties had not the least idea of that secret. The Grand Secretary had examined Mackey and stated that he had not the least idea or knowledge of Royal Arch Masonry, but instead thereof he had told the people he had deceived a long story about 12 white marble stones, etc., etc., and that the rainbow was the Royal Arch, with many other absurdities equally foreign and ridiculous. The earliest known record of the degree being actually conferred is a minute of the Fredericksburg Lodge, Virginia, United States of America, stating that on December 22nd, 1753, 3 brethren were raised to the degree of Royal Archmason. A facsimile of this entry is in the Transactions, Quatuor Coronati Lodge, Volume 4, page 222, also in Brother Hughan's Origin of the English Rite of Freemasonry. While the earliest records traced in England are of the year 1758, during which year several brethren were raised to the degree of Royal Arch in a lodge meeting at the Crown at Bristol. This lodge was a modern one, and its records therefore make it abundantly clear that the Royal Arch degree was not by any means confined to the Antients, though it was not officially recognized by the Grand Lodge of the Moderns, whose secretary wrote in 1759, "Our society is neither Arch, Royal Arch or Ancient." However, at the Union of Ancients and Moderns in 1813, it was declared that pure ancient masonry consists of 3 degrees and no more, namely those of the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason, including the supreme order of the Holy Royal Arch. This lends color to the idea that at some time or other the Royal Arch had formed part of the Master Mason's degree, though when and by whom it was separated from it no one has yet discovered, for we may dismiss as utterly uncorroborated by any proof the assertion that Ramsay was the fabricator of the Royal Arch degree, and equally unsupported is the often made assertion that Dunkerley invented it, though he undoubtedly played a very active part in extending it. The late brother W.J. Hughan, in his Origin of the English Rite of Freemasonry, 1909, page 90, favors the theory that a word was placed in the Royal Arch prominently, which was previously given in the sections of the 3rd degree and known as the ancient word of a Master Mason, and considers that, according to this idea, that which was once lost and then found in the 3rd degree in one of the sections was subsequently under the new regime discovered in the Royal Arch, only much extended and under most exalted and dignified surroundings. In England, Scotland, and the United States, the legend of the degree is the same, though varying in some of the details, but the ceremony in Ireland differs much, for it has nothing to do with the rebuilding of the temple as narrated by Ezra, but with the repairing of the temple by Josiah, the 3 chief officers or principals being the king, Josiah, the priest, Hilkiah, and the scribe, Shaphan, not as in England, Zerubbabel, Haggai, and Jeshua, or as in America, high priest, king, and scribe. At one time in England, only past masters were eligible for the degree, and this led to a system called passing the chair, by which a sort of degree of past master was conferred upon brethren who had never really served in the chair of a lodge. Now a Master Mason who has been so for 4 weeks is eligible for exaltation. In Scotland, Royal Arch Masonry is not officially recognized by the Grand Lodge, though the Grand Chapter of Royal Arch Masons for Scotland was formed in 1817. Dr. W.J. Chetwood Crawley, in his Commentaria Hiernica Fasciculus First, says of the Royal Arch degree, it is not a separate entity, but the completing part of a Masonic legend, a constituent ever present in the compound body even before it developed into a degree. If the Royal Arch fell into desuetude, the copestone would be removed and the building left obviously incomplete. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.